What if I told you there is a country in the Western Hemisphere where beauty and danger exist on the same street, sometimes in the same moment, a place where vibrant colors, music, and laughter fill the air? Yet just a few steps away, silence tells a very different story. For decades, Colombia was known to Americans for one thing: fear, headlines filled with drug cartels, violence, and names the world learned to dread. At one point, a major city here averaged more than a dozen murders every single day. Not during a war, not during a crisis, just daily life. But here's the part most people don't know: that same city is now praised as one of the most innovative urban transformations in the world. Tourists walk its streets, art covers its walls, cafes overflow with life. And yet, beneath this transformation, traces of the past still breathe quietly, waiting to be noticed. Colombia is full of contradictions that challenge how Americans think about safety, freedom, beauty, and survival. In one region, women are celebrated as symbols of passion and strength. In another, young girls are hidden away for years, not as punishment, but as tradition, preparing them for adulthood in a way few outsiders could imagine. There are communities here with no running water, no electricity, no hospitals, yet they exist only miles from modern airports and luxury resorts. In fact, thousands of people live inside an abandoned airport terminal, raising children where planes were once meant to land. This is not a story meant to shock you for entertainment, it's meant to unsettle you just enough to make you question what progress really means, because Colombia is not simply dangerous, it's not simply beautiful, and it is certainly not simple. It is a place where history never fully disappears, it just changes clothes. And as we move forward, you'll see how a country the world once feared is now quietly asking a deeper question. Can a nation truly outrun its past, or does it simply learn how to live with it? Stay with me, because the next part reveals a truth few Americans ever get to see. And to understand Colombia, you have to begin with the city that once defined its darkest reputation, Medellin. For many Americans, that name still triggers a single image: violence, cartels, Pablo Escobar. A city so dangerous that, at its peak in the early 1990s, the average resident lived with the quiet understanding that tomorrow was never guaranteed. At one point, more than 16 people were killed here every day, not in distant neighborhoods, but on ordinary streets where children walked to school and shop owners opened their doors knowing they might never close them again. This was not chaos without structure. It was fear with a system. Entire districts were controlled by criminal groups. Silence became a survival skill. Trust was a luxury few could afford. And for outsiders, Medellin became a symbol of everything that could go wrong when inequality, corruption, and desperation collide. But history did not stop there. Something unusual happened in Medellin. Instead of trying to erase its past, the city chose to confront it directly. Not with monuments of shame, but with tools of dignity. Public transportation became a lifeline. Cable cars connected isolated hillside communities to the city center. Not just physically, but economically. Escalators were built where gunfire once ruled stairways. Libraries rose in neighborhoods that had never known quiet. Art followed. Walls that once absorbed bullet holes were covered in color. Murals replaced warnings. Stories replaced silence. And for the first time in generations, children grew up seeing something other than fear reflected back at them. Today, visitors walk these same streets and feel something unexpected: energy, creativity, pride. Medellin is now cited by urban planners around the world as a case study in transformation. A city that refused to accept the future others had assigned to it. But here is the part rarely shown in travel brochures: transformation does not mean disappearance. Just a few turns away from tourist routes, the echoes remain. Addiction still lingers in the shadows. Entire blocks exist where people move slowly, trapped in cycles that progress never fully reached. The city learned how to heal, but some wounds close slower than others, and that tension defines Colombia as a whole. Beauty here is not polished. It is raw, alive, sometimes uncomfortable. You see it in the people. Colombians are often described as warm, expressive, and emotionally open. Conversations happen easily. Music spills into streets. Laughter is loud, physical, contagious. Life is lived outward, not guarded behind walls, but that openness comes from history. When life has been fragile for so long, joy becomes an act of resistance. In some regions, women are admired not only for appearance, but for resilience. Generations of conflict forced women into roles of providers, protectors, decision-makers. Strength here is not abstract. It is practical, visible, earned. Yet in other parts of the country, traditions operate by rules that outsiders struggle to understand. There are indigenous communities where a girl's transition into womanhood means complete separation from the world. For years, she lives in isolation, guided only by elders, learning patience, discipline, and responsibility. No school, no technology, no modern influence to Americanize. It may seem harsh, but within the culture, it is preparation, a belief that adulthood should be earned slowly, not rushed. Colombia does not ask to be judged quickly. It resists simple conclusions, and then there are the places that force you to confront inequality directly. On the edge of modern infrastructure, families live without clean water. Children carry heavy containers daily, measuring survival in liters. Illness is common. Opportunities are not. In some cases, entire communities exist inside abandoned structures meant for transit and progress. Places designed to move people forward have become permanent shelters for those left behind. This contrast is not hidden. It exists in plain sight. A luxury hotel across the road from a settlement without electricity. A world-class airport beside families who have never boarded a plane. Progress and neglect sharing the same horizon. This is not a failure unique to Colombia. But here, it is impossible to ignore, and that is why Colombia matters, because it challenges the American instinct to label places as either safe or dangerous, successful or broken, advanced or backward. Colombia is none of those things alone, it is all of them at once. As we continue, the question becomes less about what Colombia is, and more about what it reveals, about resilience, about the cost of transformation, and about what happens when a nation decides to move forward without pretending its past never existed. The next part takes us deeper into lives rarely seen, where survival itself becomes a form of quiet courage. To truly understand Colombia, you have to step beyond the cities that appear on postcards and into the lives that exist far from the promises of modernization. This is where the story becomes quieter, heavier, and harder to forget. In parts of the country rarely discussed, daily life is not measured in plans or ambitions, but in access. Access to water, to medicine, to safety, to time. For thousands of families, clean water is not something that flows when a handle is turned. It is something carried. Children wake before sunrise, lifting containers nearly half their weight, walking long distances under heat that offers no mercy. Every step matters, because spilling water means starting again. Illness often follows scarcity. Skin infections, stomach disease, fatigue that never fully fades. These are not emergencies here. They are routine, and routine suffering has a way of becoming invisible. One of the most striking examples lies in a place originally designed for movement and progress. An airport terminal that was meant to connect Colombia to the world now shelters entire families. Concrete floors replaced bedrooms. Check-in counters became cooking spaces. Where departure boards once flashed destinations, children now play between pillars, learning early how to adapt to instability. Planes were supposed to arrive and leave. Instead, life stopped there. Parents here do not speak of dreams in abstract terms. They speak of tomorrow, of keeping their children fed, of staying unnoticed long enough to remain. Survival is not dramatic. It is repetitive, exhausting, quiet, and yet, even here, dignity persists. You see it in the way clothes are washed carefully despite limited water, in the way children are taught respect, even when the world has shown little to them, in the way neighbors share food without knowing when they will eat again. Colombia has entire regions where density pushes human limits. On small islands and coastal settlements, homes are built inches apart. Privacy disappears. Noise never rests. Disease spreads quickly. But community becomes essential. Isolation is impossible. So cooperation replaces it. These places are not accidents. They are consequences. Decades of internal conflict displaced millions. Rural families fled violence, believing cities would offer safety. Many arrived with nothing but what they could carry. Housing systems were overwhelmed. Informal settlements grew faster than infrastructure. Over time, temporary shelters became permanent realities, and once poverty hardens, it becomes inherited. Children born into these conditions do not simply lack resources. They lack choices. Education becomes irregular. Healthcare becomes distant. Time becomes fragmented by responsibility instead of possibility. This is where Colombia's story becomes uncomfortable for outsiders, because it reveals that transformation is not evenly distributed. While some neighborhoods thrive, others wait. While some futures accelerate, others stall. Yet what makes Colombia remarkable is not that hardship exists. Hardship exists everywhere. What stands out is how openly it coexists with hope. In many of these communities, music is constant, not as entertainment, but as regulation. Rhythm organizes emotion. Dance releases tension. Stories are passed down orally, preserving identity where formal history has failed. Faith, in many forms, also plays a role. Not always religious, but deeply spiritual. A belief that suffering has meaning, or at least that endurance does. People here are not passive victims. They are active survivors. Women, especially, carry much of this weight. In households where men were lost to violence, addiction, or migration, women became anchors. They manage finances without money. They raise children without certainty. They navigate systems that were never designed for them. Strength here is not inspirational rhetoric. It is logistical mastery under pressure, and this is where the American viewer may feel the sharpest contrast. In the United States, struggle is often framed as temporary, a setback, a phase. In many parts of Colombia, struggle is structural. It does not pass on its own. It requires intervention, policy, patience, and time measured in generations. This does not mean Colombia is trapped. It means Colombia is honest. It does not hide its fractures beneath polished narratives. The gaps are visible. The contradictions are exposed. And perhaps that visibility is its quiet power, because when a society refuses to deny its pain, it creates the possibility of addressing it. Colombia's story is not about redemption arcs that resolve neatly. It is about coexistence, progress alongside poverty, innovation alongside neglect, joy alongside grief, and within that tension, real life happens. As we move forward, what emerges is not a country asking for pity, but understanding, not admiration, but attention, because Colombia is not asking the world to see it as perfect. It is asking to be seen as real, and in that reality lies a question that extends far beyond its borders. If resilience can exist without comfort, if dignity can survive without stability, then what truly defines a successful society? The answer may not be found in statistics or skylines, but in the quiet courage of those who wake up each day and choose to continue. As the story moves forward, it becomes clear that Colombia cannot be understood only through hardship. To stop there would be incomplete and unfair, because alongside struggle, something else has survived with remarkable strength. Joy, not the kind of joy that comes from comfort or abundance, but the kind that exists because life insists on being lived, even under pressure. In Colombia, joy is not a reward. It is a strategy. In neighborhoods where resources are scarce, celebrations still happen. Music plays during ordinary afternoons. Birthdays are marked even when gifts are small. Food is shared even when portions are thin. These moments are not denial. They are defiance. Colombians have learned that waiting for perfect conditions before allowing happiness would mean waiting forever. This mindset shapes the national character. People speak openly. Emotions are not hidden behind distance or irony. Relief is expressed. Affection is physical. Laughter is loud. These traits are not cultural accidents. They are adaptations. When uncertainty becomes normal, connection becomes essential. This is why community matters so deeply here. Neighbors know one another. Families extend beyond bloodlines. Support networks are informal but resilient. When institutions fail or arrive too late, people fill the gaps themselves. In many areas, informal economies thrive not because people reject structure, but because structure rejected them first. Street vendors, home-based services, shared transportation, local cooperatives, These systems are fragile. But they are flexible. They respond quickly. They keep people afloat. There is dignity in this ingenuity, and there is pride. Colombia carries a complicated relationship with its global image. For years, it was reduced to stereotypes. Violence, drugs, fear. Entire generations grew up knowing the world saw them through a narrow lens. That memory still lingers, which is why the country's transformation carries emotional weight, not just economic significance. Every mural, every festival, every innovation is also a statement. We are more than what you feared. We are more than what we survived. This desire to be seen fully explains much of Colombia's openness. Visitors are not just welcomed. They are invited to understand, to eat together, to listen, to stay longer than expected. But Colombia does not perform itself for approval. It presents itself honestly. That honesty includes acknowledging limits. Progress has been real, but uneven. Security has improved, but not universally. Opportunities have expanded, but not equally. These truths are spoken aloud here, not hidden, and that openness creates a rare kind of trust. Colombia does not ask outsiders to believe a polished narrative. It asks them to look closely. When you do, patterns emerge. A country shaped by displacement has learned adaptability. A society marked by loss has learned empathy. A population that endured silence has learned to speak. This does not mean Colombia is defined by pain. It means pain informed its values, and perhaps this is where the deeper lesson lies. For American audiences, Colombia challenges familiar assumptions. That safety guarantees happiness. That wealth guarantees stability. That progress follows a straight line. Colombia shows another path. One where resilience develops before comfort. Where community matters as much as infrastructure. Where meaning is created, not delivered. This does not excuse inequality. It does not romanticize struggle. It simply recognizes reality without flattening it. As the country continues to evolve, it stands at a crossroads familiar to many societies. How to modernize without erasing identity. How to grow without leaving people behind. How to remember without being trapped by memory. These questions do not belong to Colombia alone, they belong to every nation navigating change, and this is why Colombia's story resonates far beyond its borders. It is not just about a place. It is about what happens when people refuse to let history define their future, but also refuse to forget it. In the end, Colombia is not a warning or a miracle, it is a mirror. It reflects the consequences of neglect and the power of resilience, the cost of inequality and the strength of community, the scars of the past and the courage required to move forward anyway. What you see in that mirror depends on how closely you are willing to look, and perhaps the most important takeaway is not what Colombia has endured, but what it continues to practice every day, the decision to live fully, even when conditions are imperfect, the refusal to surrender joy to fear, and the quiet understanding that progress is not measured only by what is built, but by who is carried along the way. This is not the end of Colombia's story, it is an ongoing conversation, one that asks a simple, unsettling question: if resilience, dignity, and connection can survive under such pressure, then what are we capable of when we choose to see one another clearly?